consolidation. So I think there's going to be a combination of consolidation, cuts, and taxes. How that works out, I think all of us here are, looking at those numbers in 2013, and we have to figure that out. We're hoping that we can be on the team to do that, and that's why we're here.
I think this issue is so important, I put it in my opening comments. This is an issue that Shaker residents are concerned about all over the city, in every neighborhood. And the conversation usually would go something like, I'm worried about the future. I love it here. It always starts there. I love Shaker. People almost feel like they have to apologize when they want to give you some feedback about how things maybe could be a little bit better or what they envision for the future. So it starts with, I love it here, but I'm a little bit worried. And depending on the neighborhood that you happen to be in, people are worried just in general about the economy. I think everybody is. And that affects then how they're looking at their willingness to support something like an increase in taxes, whether that's for the schools, the city, or the library. So I think it's fair to say that the first reaction from Shaker residents is, I don't want a tax increase, because people feel like they're already at the edge of what they can handle in their own house. I'm just able to make my mortgage. I'm just able to take care of an aging house with extra needs. I'm just able to get the things I need for my kids. I think that's the experience of a lot of families in our community. But when you start to talk then about, well, what kind of community do we want? And some of the things that make Shaker special, a little bit what you guys have already been talking about, the conversation does change. And Shaker voters are really smart about city issues. And when I will say, well, are you ready to take your trash down to the end of the driveway yourself? Because that would save a little bit. Are you ready to say, maybe we don't need to have fireworks every year. Maybe it's an every other year. Or maybe some other city can decide to do that in the absence of us doing it. Are you ready to say that inspectors don't need to inspect our houses from the exterior every 5 years, but maybe we even go to every 7 years? Personally, I don't think that's such a great idea. But I guess what I'm saying to Shaker residents is we need to examine the kinds of standards that we have and have a bigger public dialogue about, are we going to redefine some of the services that we offer, or are we going to raise the revenue we need to raise? I do think that taxes aren't the only solution, and certainly not my first choice. I think we can expand our tax base, and we have talked a little bit about that, so I'm not going to spend much time on that. But the truth is, we would have to have some very large companies move in, university hospital size, to really start bringing in the kind of revenue we're talking about. So while I think that increasing the tax base, expanding the tax base is one piece of all of this, can't be the only piece. We have to look at some reduction in expenses. So I've just listed a number of things, but there are other issues that we can look at. I do want to just add, when we talk about decreasing expenses, we really are talking about people's jobs. And a number of the people who work for the city also are our neighbors in Shaker. And I know none of us want to be cavalier about talking about real people and their own livelihoods. So I do think the reality is, though, we are going to need to make more reductions at the city level, and I think we've hit a point in reductions that residents will notice further decreases. Lastly, I'll just say that I think we're going to need a combined effort of all three of these things, and ultimately, if we have to go to talk to citizens about what the real issues are, we're either going to cut these things or raise taxes. I do think that people will rise to the occasion. I actually think that's the ultimate outcome. But the League of Women Voters in me says it's not my decision, it's really not our decision, even though we're the ones who have to vote on it. But we need town hall meetings, we need neighborhood meetings, we need coffees all over the city to talk about these difficult issues and to make the choices together. Thank you.
Yes, well, as I reflect, I think we have to start at, as Juliana and others have said, what kind of city do we really want to be? And we need to set our standard, which becomes the vision of our city now for the next 50 years. So we're going to have to sit back and reflect and say, this is the Shaker we want to be, lay that out clearly, and then we might might have to think about, do we reorganize now? Can we do the things we were doing before, so can we reorganize? Because typically when you go through the reorganization process, you realize there's some things you may not need to do any longer. So we think about that. From there, you go, we have set our standard, and we say, okay, now, who has a standard similar to ours? Because we just can't collaborate with everyone, because if our standard's here, and someone else's standard is a little bit lower than ours, we're not going to accept that as citizens. It's not going to happen. So we have to think about that, and maybe in the process, can we raise their standard? Because in many cases, the people we have working for us are some of the best and brightest already. So maybe it's time to go out and say, you know what, admittedly, we can do that a little bit better from a Shaker perspective, and maybe we can sell that idea to allow our workforce to do some work for somebody else. That allows us to keep the standards we have and allow us to grow it a little bit so that maybe there's an opportunity for us to move forward. As we collaborate a little bit, we're going to have to do, like I said, we're going to look at all those services out there. Are these the right services for today's economy? I'm not interested in changing a lot of things, but the reality is we may have to, and we have to think that through. Now, most folks start talking about the tax increase, they look at that as what I would say is the easy way out. And it's always easy to put your hands in someone else's pocket. But the reality is that that's not what our citizens are saying. When I went to the block parties, most folks told me, Doc, I am tapped out. I'm at the max. So then we have to look at what do we have left. We are a suburban community. We have our housing stock. And maybe the time is for us to develop that housing stock and take it to the next level so that it can compete with the new houses out there. This is tough to do. But if we make that investment, when we sell the houses, maybe then Shaker reaps some of that reward. What does that do? It stabilizes all our neighborhoods so that the property values continue to go up. It makes sure that you don't have that eyesore house because we decided that that house is our house. That's part of our economy. It's part of what goes on here. And if we make those properties the best they can be, then as the new people are starting to arrive in Cleveland, and they're coming, we already know that. When the MedMart guys show up, they want to come to Shaker now because the housing stock's improved. When the casinos show up, they want to come to Shaker because the housing stock's improved. So if we walk through and decide the vision of who we want to be as a city, and walk through the reorganization aspect, do some collaboration, maybe sell our services a little bit, and then finally invest in those houses, those 400 houses out there, to transform them so that people say, I want to live there. Then we stabilize the community, and then we're in a position that maybe we don't have to tap into our taxes. We're still on the table. Thank you.
The City of Shaker Heights actually has two budgets that are in question with this discussion that we're having. It has a capital budget, and that capital budget is what is directly affected by the loss of the estate tax. The capital budget is the budget that we use to actually repair our streets, bridges, roads, those kind of things. And that money directly comes from the taxes levied on a person's estate in excess of $338,000 of a net estate. And that's the level it is now. It will end January 1st, 2013. The second budget that we have is the operating budget. The operating budget is the budget that we use to actually pay people, the budget that we use to actually pay our bills, and the budget that we use to make sure that the city can run efficiently. The municipal income tax funds that budget. Now, the moderator indicated that we should address the issue of whether or not we should raise the income tax. The income tax hasn't been raised in about 25 years. It's made up of 2% of a person's paycheck. It's split between the City of Shaker Heights and another city if that person works in another part of this community. We have reserves, both in our capital budget and also in our operating budget. We are probably going to spend down some of that reserve in light of the loss of the estate tax, but that is not definite at this point. There is a deliberation that's going on now between the administration and council as to just how we will address the shortage. So to actually come down in favor of raising the tax rate now is a bit premature. We are continuing to maintain as best we can with a very deliberate and I think rational formula for determining how we will spend our capital revenue until we actually have to start replacing it. I think that we are not the only community that is going to be facing this issue, and because everybody is going to be affected, because everybody is losing the estate tax, I think a collaborative and probably very, very studied approach to how this is going to affect all Ohioans is going to come up. So I would hope that my colleagues here on the panel and you folks out there can consider what you want to do in terms of trying to affect that debate. Thank you.